Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're back on the layout and we're going to be talking about an engine that Lionel recently released. It's a New York Central engine, and this engine actually has a very special freight service that it pulled that we're also going to be talking about. And yeah, we're going to just get into the engine itself, a little bit of the history as usual, and then we'll talk about the model itself and give it a run around the layout. So let's get started. Okay guys, so here it is. This is a New York Central Mohawk. So these engines are basically just 482 steam locomotives, and most of the other railroads called them mountain engines, but the New York Central Railroad decided to name them Mohawk after the Mohawk River, which is one of the routes that these engines ran along all the time up in New York. Upper New York State. They had 4 classes of these Mohawks that were built by both Alco and the Lima Locomotive Works between like 1916 and 43. So we've got L1s, L2s, L3s, and L4s. This happens to be an L2A here, this particular model. And they were actually designed to haul passenger trains, but they were used very often for freight trains, which is what this particular one is. And in particular, this was used for this Pacemaker freight service, which we'll talk about. So, but if you these Mohawks actually have a pretty long history. If you go online and you do some research on them, you'll find all kinds of interesting information about them. But they were pretty much New York Central's preeminent freight power. Because their routes were basically gradeless. They almost had gradeless flat routes, which they called their water level routes because they ran all along these rivers. And so they never needed that larger freight power like a lot of the other railroads needed. So these were perfect, and at their pinnacle, New York Central had 600 of these Mohawks, which is just a huge amount of engines that they use for their freight service. So, I mean, they first got these delivered by Alco in 1916. Those were, of course, the L1s. And then the last bunch of L3s, which is the 3rd generation, they actually use for dual service, which they use for both freight and passenger service. So kind of cool, the history of the Mohawks from when they were first delivered all the way up to when they finally ended in the late 50s, when diesel was kind of taking over steam at that point. Today there are only 2 Mohawks left, I believe. One is the 3001 and one is the 2933. So the 3001 is an L3A generation, and I believe it's still in the Blue Island train yard, although it was supposed to be donated to the Central Railroad Museum of Elkhart, Indiana, but I'm not sure if it ever made it there or not, and if it's still sitting in the Blue Island train yard. The other one is an L2D. This is an L2A, but same generation, L2. And that one's in the Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri. So there's still 2 that you can see, and one like this one, which is the L2. And the L2s are very, distinctive in their look because they have this feed water heater on the front here, and so very easily recognizable that it's an L2 generation. So. Yeah, and so really cool history about this engine for New York Central, but I mean, this was used on what they called their water level route, which was really primarily operating in like the Great Lakes and Mid-Atlantic regions, connecting like New York with Boston, and then it in the east, and then with Chicago and St. Louis in the Midwest, and then all the intermediate cities in between there, which would have been like Albany, Buffalo, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Detroit, Syracuse, and things like that. So, so really cool. Again, it's kind of funny because I did my review on the Hudson, and if you remember that review, it was named, that engine was named after the Hudson River, and they did the same thing here with the Mohawks. So these mountain engines were actually named after the Mohawk River in upstate New York. So, which I believe is a tributary that feeds the Hudson River. So, and then the other thing about the Mohawk is they pulled this very famous service called the Pacemaker freight service, and it was basically supposed to be an overnight fast freight LCL merchandise type of train, so less than carload lot shipments. And in 1946, they offered this Pacemaker overnight service between New York and Buffalo. And basically, it had this very special paint scheme with these boxcars, which is this vermilion red and gray paint scheme. So if we look at some of the boxcars here, this is what they looked like for this fast freight service. And they use these Mohawks to pull this. Now, in my particular case right here, this engine that we're looking at is one of Lionel's fantasy engines. So I don't usually go for the fantasy engines from Lionel. These are paint schemes that weren't real. But this particular one kind of stood out because of the red and the gray paint scheme on it that matches the Pacemaker freight service. Now, of course, the Boxcars and the Caboose were really painted in those colors, and it was quite probably an impressive sight when you saw it going down the rails. But of course the engines were just black. The Mohawks were just black. But Lionel did this Pacemaker model here to match the cars, and I think this one is actually going to be sort of a surprise hit, kind of like the Verandas with the Army version, which again was another fantasy version, but was turned out was a big seller and really popular. I think this is also going to be the same thing. When I was at Nicholas Smith, there was actually somebody calling in about trying to find one of these red ones. So, really nice job. So, yeah, that's the basic history of the Pacemaker service. There's a whole bunch of stuff online if you really want to get into the details of it, but pretty cool. They had this fast freight LCL service that they were running, and they made this special paint scheme for the Boxcars and the Caboose. And now we actually have an engine here that matches that. So let's take a look at the model itself. Okay, so like I said, this is a 4A2 Mohawk engine. This is an L2A, which again you can see by the feed water heater on the front of the engine. Very identifiable. Like I said, this is in vermilion red and gray. So what I really like about this model that they made is because the red because they made the piping and everything in the gray instead of red, it really stands out against the engine itself. And a lot of these details, all this piping and this really fine detail on the engine here is stuff that sort of blends in on black engines. Like, you don't notice it as much. It's all there. It's just that it doesn't really stand out. You don't really see all the detail so easily when everything is all black. And that's one of the cool things about this engine, is that you get all this incredible detail on it because it's so contrasting against the red background, and even the gray up at the top here against the silver on the front of the engine boiler. So just great piping detail down to the rivets. Really nice. So white wall drivers. It's got all the standard stuff, you know, smoke, whistle smoke, Kutak sounds, sliding hatches here on the top. Real co-load on the tender. I love they did the handrails and stuff also in the gray. Again, makes it this nice contrasting color. Really stands out. It's got the road number on the back here, New York Central logo, so there's a reverse light and two markers on the back here. The markers are in red. Of course, it's got an electric coupler. What's really cool is I don't think I have one single tender that has white wall wheels on it, and these do, which looks super neat. The other detail that I really like that they did on the tender here is the Pacemaker script that they put right on the top edge of the sides of the coal load bin. It really fits because it goes with the freight cars that get pulled behind it. And of course inside here we've got 2 cab figures and details on the inside, just like all the other legacy locomotives. I think the front is the best part of it, right? There's just an incredible amount of detail on the front here. So yeah, that's it. So really cool. I love the paint scheme now. They did a really good job with the red. I was afraid that the red was going to be too bright. You have to be careful sometimes with these fantasy colors. But they actually, it's like really sort of a little bit of a muted red. Really fits, and it does match all the boxcars, it seems. So really nice job on the color itself. Alright, so let's hook up the boxcars here, and then we'll start her up and see what she sounds like.
Dispatch, I'm looking at that block signal. Can we move? Over. Need to hold you. Hold for your signal. Out. Air test is good. Ready to pull. Brake test okay. Are we clear to pull? Over. You are clear through my limits. Out.
Okay guys, so that's it for the Lionel New York Central Mohawk. The new Mohawks are in, they're fantastic, and of course full legacy, great detail as always. But this Pacemaker one with the vermilion red and gray paint scheme is really, really nice. I think this is going to be actually a surprise seller. It's going to sell out pretty quickly. So if you're interested in one of these, I'd suggest you go grab one as fast as you can, because I don't think they're going to be around that long. They just go great with the entire Pacemaker freight service set, and it looks fantastic. So especially with all the contrasting detail, the piping, and everything else. So, and that's it for today's video. So as always, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and make any comments down below. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace, guys.